sort of as we, but we can go ahead and get started, and then folks will join us. So welcome everybody. It's hard to believe, but it is the last event of what has been a 2-year speaker series that I've been so excited to be part of. So we're thrilled that you're all here today and very excited about the speakers that we have. I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement for York University. We are sort of transnationally situated here, so please take the time and space to sort of connect with the land upon which you find yourselves in whatever ways are relevant to where you are. York University recognizes that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Okay, so before we get started today, I want to thank York Center for Refugee Studies, York's Faculty of Education, and Wendell International Kenya for your continued support of this series throughout the last couple of years. I also want to take a minute, I haven't done this in the past, to kind of formally acknowledge the energy and efforts of the planning committee of this colloquium, which includes Sharari Kashi, who's here today, Maladeo Shiburu, who's here, Philemon Misoy, who is a co-moderator with me today, and Esther Munene, as well as myself. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure to get to think and talk through these sessions with you. So I am Rachel Silver. I'm an assistant professor of education at York University and co-director of BHER. I'm not going to spend any time more speaking about myself, but rather I'm going to introduce Philemon Misoy, who has worked to varying degrees with all of today's speakers, and then from there move on to the content of this morning. So Misoy is the BHER Project Liaison Officer based in Dadaab, Kenya. He holds a Bachelor of Education degree from Moi University and has served in the Dadaab Refugee Education Program in various capacities for many years. It says more than 8 here, but I think that's dated and we're closer to 10. Am I correct, Misoy?
Yes.
Yeah, so with a focus on secondary and tertiary education. And before joining BHER, he served in the position of secondary school principal and camp administrator in Hagadera Refugee Camp in Kenya. So welcome, and I will turn it over to Misoy.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for that wonderful introduction. Welcome everyone to today's event. I wish to take some few minutes to allow our panelists, Professor Kombo, Professor Kerry, and Professor Warsami to just introduce themselves, because we have a team, which is a stellar team from diverse higher education institutions in Europe and Africa. So I'll take this opportunity to allow Professor Warsami to start us off by telling us where she is in the world currently, which institution she's from, and how she's been connected to the work that BHER is doing. Welcome, Professor Warsami.
Thank you, Philemon. So thank you, Rachel and Sherry. Thank you to everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Fosia Warsami. Currently, I'm the Deputy Chief of Party for a 5-year project funded by USAID. It's an accelerated basic education program. We basically, our beneficiaries are out of school children and marginalized children who have never either been to school or have no access to schooling. This program targets mostly marginalized communities in what was previously known as South Central Somalia, including regions in Southwest, Hirshabelle, Jubaland, and Banadil region. Currently, the project is into its 3rd year. We have over 40,000 students in the program, and next year we are adding another 35,000. The target to reach at the end of the project is 100 to 140,000 students that are out of children. Target age groups include from 9 years to 18 years. And it's primary basic education, accelerated meaning for those who are not familiar with the term is that the 8-year primary schooling is done in just 4 years. That 2 grade levels are collapsed into one, and that's called level. So we leveled them, and we leveled them according to age and their ability, academic ability. Mind you, most of these children, 90% of the children who are in the current program now have never been to school. And some have been, but have, for whatever reason, whether security or finance, have not been able to continue their schooling. So this wonderful program, it's also, besides the academics, it's also an institutional building. We have done the accelerated basic education curriculum, developed it, published it. We've also established a policy for it that every program and every other NGO funder can use. And it's really been a good effort and has become a national program. Previously, I was a Dean of Faculty of Education at the Somali National University, and this is where my connection is with BHER and York University. I've been working with York University on and off with this kind of programming, and in terms of conferencing and symposiums since 2008, if I'm being honest. So it's a long-term relationship, and I'm very glad today that I've been invited again to sit on this panel and talk about our connections and linkages and different programs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Warsami. We are so glad that you are part of the panel this afternoon. I wish to allow Professor Kombo to also introduce himself by telling us where he is, which institution, and how it's been connected to the BHER work.
Thank you so much, Mr. Misoy. My name is Professor Kisilu Kombo. I'm a dean in the School of Education, Kenyatta University. I've been there as long as I can be able to remember. I started being at the university in 1980 is when I joined. Up to now, I've never left my university. And I just want to say before I continue, I want to say good morning, those ones who are now starting the day and afternoon, and thank you so much for the invitation. I want to say that Kenyatta University is a university that basically specializes in training teachers. In East and Central Africa, we are the biggest university. And the school itself is the biggest. We have around 38,000 students who take education, and have about 300 members of staff. They are spread all over. We have campuses all over. Basically, how we are connected is that I chair a board called the Refugee board, and I've been there for the last 4 years. And that is the story that I have. But basically, if you allow me, Chair, I want also to say that beside the work that I was given to chair the board that deals with the refugees, is that before I was a deputy director, open learning. Then I rose to the ranks. I became a chair of a department for about 6 years. Then I became also a director teaching practicum. From there, I was given another serious docket of being chair of peace and security studies. And then I've been a resource person in quite a number of areas, especially Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development. It deals with the curriculum. And then I also offer my service at Commission for University Education. and my area of specialization is sociology of education. And I've also published quite extensively. And I've also carried out research locally and internationally. So thank you so much for the opportunity and also for the invitation.
Thank you, thank you. We look forward to hearing more as the session goes on. Next is Professor Carrie Bystrom. Welcome, Kerry. Tell us where you are, which institution, and how you connected to work that BHER is doing.
Thank you so much, Misoy and Rachel and everyone else involved in this panel. It's really an honor to be with all of you today among so many people whose work I've deeply respect and admire. So my name is Carrie Bystrom. I'm an associate professor of English and human rights and the associate dean of the college at Bard College Berlin, a liberal arts university based in Berlin, Germany. We're very small. Unlike KU, for instance, we have only about 300 students. But since I've been here, we've made supporting students from areas of crisis and conflict a priority. And so far, we've now given over 40 full BA scholarships to students from areas such as Syria, Afghanistan, Eritrea, and others. So over 10% of our student body now comes from this sort of background, which has been an incredible opportunity for our whole university in terms of the chance to really rethink what it is we're trying to do, how to teach, what knowledge is important and matters, and will be most helpful for building a shared future together. Along with my work at Bard College Berlin, I also co-run 2 refugee education programs for the Open Society University Network. For folks who aren't aware of the Open Society University Network, or OSUN, OSUN is a global network of universities that aims to foster critical thinking and intellectual inquiry and to strengthen the foundations of open societies in the midst of a resurgence of authoritarian regimes, to inspire students to address global challenges by getting to know other societies from the inside, and by expanding access to higher education at a time of growing inequities. So I work on 2 projects as part of OSUN, the Connected Learning Initiative, the Hubs for Connected Learning Initiatives, and the Open Learning Initiatives projects, which in the first one works with students based in Kenya and Jordan who are in camps, as well as urban refugees in a blended or hybrid fashion. And the second one, which is a preparatory program, which assists students in person. We have 3 campuses that we work with: Central European University, Bard College Berlin, and the University of East London. So I look forward to telling you a bit more about these programs as we move forward.
Absolutely, Kerry. We look forward to hearing more about these wonderful programs from OSUN and Bard College in Berlin. So lastly, we had one of the panelists, that's Professor Nashon Samson from the University of British Columbia. We've had a last minute information that is not going to be part of the team today because of a family problem. So just to let our participants know that we are not going to have Professor Nashon as part of the panelists today. So hope you understand. I will hand it over back to Rachel for the next phase.
Sure. So our first question has to do, primarily and first off with your involvement with the BHER project. So by expanding or by seeking to expand access to higher education for refugees, the BHER project was imagined to be a decolonizing effort of sort, made possible through partnership between higher educational institutions in the global North and the global South. And I want to start by asking first Professor Combo and then Professor Bystrom, can you speak to your experiences partnering transnationally? What opportunities and what challenges do you see and have you seen in these arrangements?
I want to be the first one because you mentioned my name first. So I want to say that this partnering is the way to go, because this is where you find that students allowed to move from one university or from where they are, from one country to the other. And this kind of mobility, it really helps, because you may find that a university does not have certain facilities and even certain expertise. So when these students move and go to the other university, they are able to acquire what they were not able to get from their countries. And this is the way to go. And quite a number of countries have really been doing it. And I may not even be able to quote quite a number because there are many. We have UK, we have South Africa, Brazil, India, and quite a number of others. And this is like crossbreeding, where you find that students, together with even staff, when they move out and go to the other universities in other countries, they are able really to see what goes on there. Probably from where they have come from, the kind of education is not really so high. But sometimes even you find that they move from one university to the other, probably where they have come from, the education is equally good. But once they go, they will be able to gain some experience. They will be able to get something new that they were not before able to get it. And the question that you asked on the opportunities is that they are able to know what goes on outside their environment. And with that one, they will be able now to compare where they have come from and where they have gone, and they will be able to see how things are done differently. And you find that if we have a certain weakness, probably they have been complaining about their own country or about their own institutions. Once they move and go to other countries or other universities, they are able now to be able to say, after all, we are not badly off, or after all, we have been missing this and the other. So there are quite a number of advantages in that they are able to see and appreciate the culture that they have come across. And this is where now they are able to see the culture that they will be able to come across. And I want to say that sometimes when students move out to other universities, the first one is that probably they were not able to communicate so fluently in their own language, or the language of the medium of communication. Probably if it's English, German, whichever one that they were using. But once they move and go to another country and find that the language there is totally different, and it's part of the challenge that I may want to talk about, they get what we may call culture shock, because they are going to a new place. Probably the language that is being used is not the language that they were used to. And this one is very, very true, especially when we are talking about our refugees, that they have come from a background where they were using Arabic. Now they go to a background where they will be required to use English. And with that one, they will become somehow uncomfortable with the kind of language of communication. So as we look at this, we look at it very broadly to see the opportunities and whether the opportunities outweigh the challenges. But I want to point out very clearly that when students move out to a foreign country, they are likely to have a serious challenge in that some countries may not really be so willing to accept the new people who have come in. Because quite a number of countries, and I think this one goes without saying, given what we have seen, is that there is some kind of uneasiness where they have gone. Some people feel that their opportunities have been taken over by the people who have come from other places. So these are some of the challenges, but the serious one is when it comes to cost of living. Probably from where they have come from, they did not have challenges of money. Because even if they don't have money, they can be able to look for people who can help them, but they have now moved and gone to other countries for education. It becomes a big challenge to some extent. And this is now how I see it. But over and above all, I want to say this is the direction to go, because once they move out, they become uncomfortable for some time, but after some time, they will be able to adopt, and finally they become part of the system. So basically, I want to say that much, and probably you can come to me much later, but that is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Bystrom.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with Professor Combo's points about the benefits for students and getting exposed to a different tradition and language of instruction. But I think I'm going to focus a bit more on the benefits for the university itself, for our professors, for our curriculum as a whole that can come from international cooperation, especially the kind of non-hierarchical, like real cooperation that BHER has been pioneering. And I did not get a chance to mention earlier when I introduced myself that I did have a wonderful opportunity to teach for the BHER program 2 years ago to a group of students. I see some of them on this call, which is wonderful, to a group of students in Dadaab on a course called Writing African Futures, which was designed jointly with Kenyan colleagues as well from the refugee communities working in the camps, and my colleagues at BHER. And that was a really important experience for me. I want to give a little bit more detail maybe of my first experience ever teaching this kind of class, which does predate BHER, and then try to draw on these kind of joint experiences to think about three benefits that we can gain from this type of projects and three challenges. So just to say, the first experience that I had in a meaningful kind of cross-cultural course design project was a program called the International Human Rights Exchange, which was done between the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg and Bard College. And it brought together students from both places for a semester-long interdisciplinary human rights program, in which all of the courses were co-devised and co-taught by professors from the United States and professors based at the University of the Witwatersrand. I had different iterations to amazing colleagues, one from Ghana and one from Zimbabwe, that helped to design a course on African literature and human rights. And it really was a remarkable experience to be able to sit down, for instance, with my colleague Tabazani Ndlovu from Zimbabwe, who's a Zimbabwean English literature specialist and a short story writer and novelist, and to think together from my perspective as someone trained in a very particular kind of tradition of human rights that were developed in the 18th century in France and England, through the French Revolution and the American Declaration of Independence, to step back and be able to think from a different context about what are these rights, how do we communicate them to other people, and what role does literature play, whether it was oral literature like Ghanaian proverbs or Zimbabwean modernist experimental literature. How does it really help us understand this idea and this practice of human rights better? And I think the students really benefited greatly by having those ideas interwoven in a shared syllabus that had two professors together side by side the whole time to field questions that would be coming from different angles, to give different kinds of responses, right, and to model a sort of cross-geographic dialogue that's also modeled for students. How can we come together and think? How can we each expand our ideas in our regions and come to that different perspective on our starting place that Professor Combo talked about students being able to do when they get exposed to different models of education? So I've sort of built on that I was lucky enough to build on that as a career. And now I supervise a lot of these joint classes that take place across the OSU network. Right now, I'm co-teaching a class on civic engagement with colleagues from Kyrgyzstan, Palestine, an exiled Belarusian university in Lithuania, the European Humanities University, Bard College in the United States. And, we really find semester after semester, just like in the BHER program, that students value greatly the chance to get input from other places, as well as to have their own knowledges validated, right? To be shared and validated with other people. So, as I said, I would give three ideas about how to make this work from my perspective in a meaningful way, which I've gleaned. One of them is that what seems not to work, I think in my experience, is like when one side or one place, whoever it is, there's always many sides, it comes up with a syllabus and just like sends it somewhere, and then the other people just follow it. Like this is not really helpful. It ends up being out of context and very difficult to convey information and doesn't really allow for transformation. So I would say, it's important to start as early as possible with the colleagues to begin to develop a curriculum together, right? Because that's where so much of the benefit is, right? The actual joint ideation of what's going on. Secondly, I've realized that I had to give up a lot of my ideas about content that should go into classes and curricula and really focus more on process, right? How it is that we learn from each other. So not just putting learning about places that we might have in common or other places in a curriculum, but really foregrounding the process of learning from other people and other geographies in class, which inevitably means taking out readings, taking out topics, getting rid of the syllabus, right? And really spending a lot of time listening to each other, especially when we have students from different places, and then taking the time to reflect on what we get out of it, right? I really believe in reflection papers and a chance to debrief after sessions to consolidate knowledge. It takes time. You don't get to introduce something new because you're always going back to something that you've already done, but it's a way of actually helping it take root among the students and among the staff. And the third thing I would say about what makes it work is continuity. I mean, I think a lot of times, these are one-off projects, and one-off projects, one-off classes, like it's very hard. And you don't always get the fruit of the labor until you've done a shared course or a shared project, a number of times. And I would just say, not to give up, to really think about these projects as long-term investments rather than short-term projects. In terms of the challenges, again, I just have three, and I'll try to be very quick about this. I think that really shaping curriculum and educational opportunities together takes a lot of time. And that's time that is qualitatively harder for colleagues from Global South or Global Majority institutions often to put in, because their institutions tend to be more under-resourced. They tend to have more students. They tend to have more teaching hours. They tend to have, not in all cases, but often more rigid institutional structures. And so it's really important to keep those constraints in mind and to try to figure out institutional solutions that will really allow people, all partners within a project, to buy in, because we're not starting from the same playing field in terms of like resources and time that can be brought into projects. I also think, I just speak for myself as a professor based in Germany, trained in the United States, from the United States, like I have to be really mindful of my tendency to try, like, be in charge of things and feel like I know how to do things, and to step back and practice listening and trying to reorient to the context where I'm working. This is, as I said, I think someone from a very privileged background, it's really hard and it takes constant practice, but it's something I'm still working on for myself as I go forward. And the third thing that I would say is that the third challenge to highlight is really trying to mesh classroom cultures, because they can be quite different. I mean, where I'm coming from, I think probably where Rachel and John and others are coming from, you know, we're used to students being trained to criticize, to engage, to jump in, to question knowledge and question authority. And many of our students are going through systems in which that's just not the expectation, right? It's more the banking model of education that Freire points out. And so I think it's actually, I find it takes a lot of work. It can take a lot of work to bring those classroom cultures together and in a positive sort of synthesis. So those are the three opportunities and the three challenges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kerry and Professor Komba, for that wonderful exposition on how to decolonize higher education in the context of North-South collaborations. Now, my next question goes to Professor Warsami. And I will ask that, what potential does higher education offer to decolonize knowledge production in and beyond refugee studies? And if any, you could tell us any limitations that do exist. And I would ask that you also be free to reflect on your own transnational professional trajectory and experience.
Sorry, can you repeat the question for me? The internet is fuzzy now.
I'm asking, what potential does higher education offer to decolonize knowledge production in and beyond refugee studies?
Thank you. Yes, you know, it's a very broad question and can be very theoretical. I want to just concentrate, for the sake of time, that my experience is both within working in Somalia for the past 10 years, mostly working in a challenging post-conflict society, but also my experiences working with the BHER project and the refugee context. You know, in terms of challenges, I think Professor Kerry kind of alluded to the challenges. The main one is, and I agree with her, is you know, is the sustainability aspect. These collaborations are often one-off or very short term. So that it's an impediment in terms of you know, any kind of you know, long-term solutions to the many challenges that you know, in the context of refugee or in the context of post-conflict recovery. So sustainability is the main challenge. In terms of my experiences and what the benefits are, I mean, you know, despite the challenges, I think the benefits really outweigh from what I have experienced. Most of the projects or programs we have collaborated Southwest were very, very beneficial. Whether they were short or long term, or even like they didn't even finish. You know, just that collaboration, that contact, that capacity building, that exchange of ideas, that exchange of flow of knowledge, to me is the you know, the winner, you know. And I do believe that our colleagues from the North who collaborate in these kind of projects or who implement these kind of projects benefit a great deal in terms of knowledge from these interactions. Particularly, if I can speak a little bit more specific to Somalia. Somalia is a young nation. It's a post-conflict nation. There's still a lot of challenges, but it's a very young nation. Nearly 75% of demographically are youth. People who are supposed to be in, you know, education system, particularly in higher education. They are the future of the country. Higher education in Somalia is very scarce and lacks quality for obvious reasons. But there are also many educational programs, whether it's you know, international donor funded or you know, institutional collaborations. There are many programs that tap into this youth mindset. And one of the benefits, aside from the academics, is the exchange and flow of ideas and the ideological changes that occur, the worldview that happens, and the synergy that happens with changing worldviews about one another is the most beneficial. I've been in many programs, including the current one I'm working for, and most often the benefit is this, the change of worldview and bringing people together and benefiting from that. Somali youth need that. They need to be open and connected to the world. They don't want to be isolated. They want to be not only productive members of their own society and on their own country, but they also want to be productive members of the global society. So these kind of exchanges and interactions are very beneficial. Higher education is something that's very much neglected in Somalia, whether it's programs for skill building, academic programs specific to refugees, very scarce. International donors and international funders don't want to touch that, and it's very scarce. So it's programs like BHER and institutions like York University and I think it's BART College in Germany. These are the champions of these kind of programs, but it's very limited. In terms of decolonization, I always joke with my dear brother Mohammed Douale, who is a York prodigy and a York student, that also Somali, that I've left my decolonization theorizing back when I was at OISE as a PhD student. I'm in the real life. I just need to do the real thing in the real field, and theorizing about it is secondary to me. But these are very important questions. These are really important questions. When I was dean and at the university, Somali National University, and I was doing the we were updating the curriculum. We got a lot of institutional support from other universities, including York, universities in Finland, universities in the United States. And one of the things that always came in discussion was whose curriculum should this be? Who is it for, and what context will these students use? So bearing in mind the particular context and what is needed in the field is very hard to really imagine from offices or buildings, university buildings in Germany or United States. But the field itself is very contentious and very challenging and very dangerous. And imagining that context and developing syllabi and developing curriculum for that is quite challenging to say, and it's not available in any other curriculum. So collaborations themselves, and before you go to the context, collaborating, decolonizing the collaboration and the dialogue and the discussions is what I often like to emphasize on. I think Professor Carrie put it, it's the process, it's about the process, not the end product. And the process is, the more we have these kind of networks and linkages, the more decolonization will happen. Thank you so much. I hope I answered your question succinctly. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Warsami. I know with these collaborations, then we will surely get there. Next question I will be asking Professor Kerry. Professor Kerry, in the recent Refugee Education 2030 objectives, UNHCR stated a goal of 30% access to higher education for refugees by the end of the decade. Now, my question is, what role can universities in the North play in facilitating this goal and for expanding the access of students to and other marginalized youth to university education? And secondly, what responsibilities do they have? And if there are any challenges, please do tell us.
Thank you, Misoy. I can't resist going back for a second to the previous question, just to to add to what Professor Warsam was saying, I think, it's just undeniable how much benefit now I speak for, I don't know, the Academy in Germany, whatever, how much benefit there is to be gained from these kinds of collaborations and networks. I just want to give one concrete example that also takes in this whole sort of question and ethos of decolonization. It's quite interesting to me. Often students that I have from the United States or Germany, for instance, if you take the concept of human rights, they want to decolonize human rights by just saying, like, let's get rid of human rights. This is a European construct. We should not apply it to people from other places. Like, we need to be careful and not trample on other people's traditions, which is certainly a perspective. But I think it's very important that they get confronted in classes, for instance, with BHER students or with other students based in Kakuma and Dadaab that I've had, with the perspective of people in exactly those situations in the field, on the ground, that Professor Warsam was talking about. That in fact, let's before we get rid of the concept of human rights, like, let us figure out what it means to people, right? How desperately so many people are still fighting to have their basic rights fulfilled, right? And are not at the point that we can just dispense with this idea as a Western imperialist concept. So there's something from both sides, right? That, there needs to be acknowledgement, from many human rights activists that, the background of these terms, some of the racist stereotypes that fall behind certain visions of what this term means, and the gendered stereotypes, but also a kind of acknowledgement of the fact that they matter to people, right? That they're an aspiration that they're not fulfilled in many places, and that solidarity is struggling towards that, right? It's not about necessarily just getting rid of ideas that make sense in one context. So I just wanted to put that out there as like a particular learning moment for me and for my students in the kind of global collaborative classroom that we're talking about, and the benefits and the challenges of trying to confront collaboratively, as Professor Warsam said, the situation people in Dadaab, for instance, are facing just on the ground every day, and to figure out how to best together create a curriculum that's like relevant and useful, and that also can bring benefits and important insights to collaborators in other parts of the world. In terms of the responsibility and the role of universities in supporting access to higher education and helping UNHCR reach its next goal, I'm 100% convinced that universities have a responsibility to do this, and that it's not merely a humanitarian responsibility, although I think there is an important aspect of solidarity, that it's also just a commitment to a shared future. Like, we are all here together, and we cannot continue, as we see every day, it feels like there's new conflict situations that are creating new movements of people. We have no idea. I have no idea when it's going to be the United States or Germany that's forced to move. Like, it's very short-sighted to think that there's rigid boundaries and that, something is relevant. Let us help this other group of people. Let us rather face the fact that we're in a shared planet with very finite resources. We are all linked together, and to build our common future, we have to learn from each other and support each other. And universities are a key social institution that will allow us to do that when they're able to. As I said, my institution, Bard College Berlin, has made this a strong commitment in terms of recruitment and offering scholarships. As well, the Open Society University Network has done this through the programs I mentioned, the Hubs for Connected Learning Initiatives and Olive, as well as many other programs. And also in the advocacy field through its co-chairmanship with UNHCR of the Global Task Force on Third Country Pathways, right? So I guess there's two ways forward. One of them is at the institutional level, and I think it's I'm talking right now just about providing places for students in northern universities. I'll get to another model in a second. One is to lobby for scholarships, right? We really need to be lobbying our higher administration to make a sincere and lasting commitment to having not just one token scholarship and not just 2 token scholarships, right? Enough people, like to support enough people regularly to really change the tenor of the university and to make out a wider transformation. The second thing, of course, is lobbying governments. And this is extremely hard because even when the university is willing to accept students and finds the money to do so, which is a huge problem, then we often run into problems about visa statuses. So I know that Canada has a model, a very important model on this. Right now, the President's Alliance in the United States is working to put forward a new visa pathway option that can be considered before Congress. But in Germany, there's various statuses that can be employed, but I think it's lobbying within the university. It's also lobbying at the national level to really get behind the complementary pathways to create this extra visa protection category that will allow students to attend for higher education. As I said, right then, I was just talking about me sitting in Germany, trying to open up my physical university here to more students. I think we all know on this call that most displaced people are not in Europe and the United States, and most displaced people are very near where the original conflicts come from, where they've been pushed out of their countries. And so clearly there needs to be solutions that are on site, on the ground there. And I just want to say how much I've learned from BHER's model of trying to co-create an actual degree pathway, working with local actors on the ground and bringing in the online component to create a connected learning program that will allow for the education of students on site, accredited by York, without necessarily having, or when one's not always able to bring a large contingent of students somewhere else. And I can say that we've been inspired by that at BARD and are trying to explore this kind of model to see if it's possible to replicate. And I think it would be amazing to see other institutions as well go more into this connected learning field. And of course, not to forget, figuring out productive ways to collaborate with local partners. This has been very hard. I went into this project thinking like, yes, let's form a joint program with Kenyatta University or with Moy. And I think, institutions are funny beasts. Like there's always more bureaucracy that seems to get in the way of doing that. But let us persevere, because the solution can't be just relying on the global North institutions. It doesn't make sense geographically. It doesn't make sense knowledge-wise. And it just, I'd love to work with people somehow to figure out how to bring down those barriers and allow for those, joint programs on the ground. I hope that responded to the questions.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Professor Bystrom. And actually your response transitions perfectly into our next question, which is for Professor Combo and relates to the role that Kenyatta University has played in particular in the BHER project. So as those of us who have been involved with BHER know, Kenyatta University has been a leader in expanding access to higher education for refugees in the Kenyan context for years. And so I was hoping we could ask Professor Combo a bit about his experience in this capacity and lessons he's learned from practice. And from there, I'm gonna sort of ask you a subset of questions specific to current events in Kenya, but I'll hold up on that one and start with just your experience at KU thus far in BHER and other refugee educational initiatives.
Thank you so much. I think this is a very wonderful question because it takes me to all the corners, and I just want very briefly to talk about the areas that I've come across, and they are quite several because they are part of my experience. I want to say the first experience when we went to Dadaab and Kakuma is that we realized that there is a thirst for education. There is a high demand for education from the refugees, and you find quite a number of them. They really want to go back to school, to go for some extra knowledge. And this one, I found it very interesting because you find that the demand is higher than the supply. And you find that quite a number of them, even those ones who are not near places where they can call schools, they still travel. And that tells you that there is a high demand for education. And there's, beside the demand, the thirst for it is there. After looking at that one, I also found that when it comes to application, and this one I found it in quite a number of occasions, is that you find that they are applying when they hear there are opportunities for further education, they still apply. And you find that some of them get frustrated when they find that they are not capable or they are not qualified. And this is the demand that I'm talking about that I've just seen. And it's something that can be realized when people think of a way forward. The other experience that I found is that, and I said it earlier, I said before when I began, is that the medium of communication is English. And these students have a different medium of communication, either Arabic or whichever other language that they use. And that has really been a drawback to quite a number. They really want to communicate, but you find that they are not doing it so effectively. And I found with the lecturers who teach them, they may even consider them not to be bright, not to be intelligent enough to take studies. And this is misinterpretation, probably, and I think the reason is the medium of communication. And this one I've said so many times that it's important that before they start or they are given the formal kind of education that we want, it's important that they are given some time to be able to understand the language of communication, whichever language that can be used to make them at least understand what is going on. And I found that this translates itself into the grades that they get, because they have not been taken through through that kind of education, through the language that becomes the medium of communication. And I wish they can first, before they start the normal formal education, they can be taken through some kind of education that can make them be able to perfect their language. The other one is that the experience that I've had is that some of them, and probably this is where we really need to carry out a research to find out why, there are some who join or who get admitted because of good qualifications that they have, but they don't really, the interest is not sustained all the way up to the end. Some of them join and up to a certain point, they jump out or they drop out. And this is something that sometimes worries me, that the interest is not sustained all the way. So probably we may have to reflect as we discuss this, or some people who are on the ground can be able to tell us what happens really. Why is it that after joining, after showing interest, how come that now they change their thinking and then they drop out? And when it comes also to the girls, I found that a high number of students who attend to this, who come for education, girls are the biggest casualties because they are the ones who drop out. And the question that I normally ask myself as an experience is, why, if they are the ones who drop out, what can we do to make them continue all the way? Because they have challenges of traveling for long distances. Some of them may have even children, insecurity on the way. And sometimes when I ask this question, and it's a question that has been bothering me as part of the experience that you have asked, is whether a way out can be found of even coming up with boarding schools where we are so sure that when they are put there, they will be able to go all the way up to the end. The experience that I've had also is, and it has been mentioned by Professor Kerry, and it's a very interesting one of co-creating programs. The curriculum you see together, you bring people from different backgrounds, they have different strengths here and there. And when they sit together, they come up with a wonderful curriculum. And I think this is something, I don't know how it will be done, but when it was done at KU, we had some members who came from New York University. And I want to assure the members who are listening to me that it left a permanent mark in our university. So if Kerry has, I may not even say more than what she has said, and I may not really overemphasize it, but it's something that is really very good, because you look at the different perspectives that because of different orientation that people look at and then bring it on board. So it's something that is there. The other experience that I've found is that, and this is also my personal experience, and it's good you asked me my experience, is that you find the interest is on those students who can only be able to learn, to go back to school, and students with the certificates. But how about those ones who are willing to learn, probably, and they do not have the certificates? Do we just concentrate on one group and not all the students who are there? And this is what I've always been saying, that as we build schools, we should also think of coming up with programs that can take care of students who are not talented academically, like technical and vocational education, where we teach them tailoring, carpentry, whatever it is, and something that can be of use to the immediate environment. And this has been there. It is my experience that you find you are now dealing with a small group, but there is another group that needs to be taken care of. But this is something that can be dealt with at a later time. The other one that I've also learned is that the over-reliance of the donors. And it's not only in Dadaab and Kakuma, where you find that the local people, including, and it's not even in one center or one camp, but people rely on the donors. And once donors pull out, then that is the end of the program. And the experience that I've had, and is something that I want to share with the members who are listening to me, is that the interest should not end when the funds dry out. So it should really continue, and the local communities together with, now, although I know the refugees have a challenge in terms of where they will get money, but it's something that people can think through and say, yes, donors, the interest of donors may not be there throughout. A time will come when that one will come to an end, but we really need to reflect and say, yes, when it comes to an end, what shall we do? And with that one, we will be now thinking long term. That has been my concern, and I feel that if people think through, they can come up with a solution that can be long lasting. The other one, and it's a very good experience that I've had, is that Kenyatta University, we have managed to get some of the students who joined, they completed, went to places, but the experience is also to find out where they have gone. how are they performing? This is a tracer study, finding out, because it's like once they complete, we forget about them. But I would really love to see that we have followed them up. If they have gone to Somalia, if they have gone to whichever country, a tracer study to be carried out. And these are the, in my view, these are the people who can stand back, or we can use their case studies to motivate the others, so that at least we can tell them that this kind of education is important, and the others can be able to say, if so-and-so succeeded, then why not me? And that is what I'm feeling passionately about, and I'm saying that once they give their success stories, then the others can be able to say, yes, it is possible, and they can be able to do it. The other one, the experience I've had also is that the lecturers from Kenyatta University and Professor Kerry, I don't know whether she had this experience, is that when they go to a new place, like Dadaab, Kakuma, and other places, they also get what we called earlier culture shock, that they have not been trained, they have not been given enough knowledge on what to expect. Sometimes lack of knowledge, and I know quite a number of you are religious, and it's written in the Bible, lack of knowledge quite make people perish, because they don't know really what to expect. So I'm thinking that as a way forward, and also the lesson that I learned is that we need to first have a capacity building session where those people who are involved, they can also be able to know what to expect. And the students also, they should really be taken through to understand what they will be taken through. And with that one, we will not have a problem at all with the interaction. You members, you will be able to bear me witness when I talk about the COVID-19, when it happened. It really interrupted our smooth flow of ideas and the teaching and the kind of work that we are doing. We had issues, and Misoy, and I'm happy he's also listening. We had some students from Dadaab, and they were bothered. They were very much concerned that they were not finishing on time. We were under lock and key. We could not really go to Dadaab. And that kind of situation was worrying to all of us. The experience I've had is that as we do it, we should, because this is a university, we should allow give our students knowledge that anything is possible, and they should be able to think out of a box. Not every time to be able to see a lecturer in front of them. The moment they think out of a box, then they can be able to see internet coming in and be able to adjust as the situation demands. This is what I found, and I really feel that is something. Now we have become a global village, because quite a number of people are now used to the internet. And now connected to this one, and the experience that I've had is that internet, and I am not so sure whether Misoy will be able to tell me whether it is true, that internet is still a challenge, that from Nairobi, where internet is stronger, although we still have challenges. Those people went to Dadaab, they reported back, and they said that internet connectivity is still a challenge. It's a lesson that we have to learn. And this one does not even involve a small team. It is like, it can be given a wider perspective, a wider outlook, where we are saying that we want to involve all the people so that at least internet can be made accessible to very many people.
Thank you so much, Professor. Oh, sorry.
Then I want to just, the last one is because the experience that we have had is that the issue of stakeholders engagement, so that they don't And I found that one, and it's my experience that I found some people, when I interacted with them, they were feeling that what they are getting is not probably what they should have been given. So this stakeholders engagement, as we give them the kind of education we would really, or we should really find out what is it that they really want for their immediate consumption. Basically, that is what I can say as at now, and thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much. And I actually find this conversation so generative. It could be sort of the start of a series of conversations about curriculum and co-curricular development, about student experiences, about funding. I mean, there's so many lines of thought that have come up here. I want to shift a minute to Professor Warsami just to ask a context-specific question. And if we have time, I have a context-specific question about Kenya as well, and then we can shift to Q&A. But Professor Warsami, as you mentioned, you were the Dean of the Faculty of Education at the Somali National University. And I'm wondering, you spoke to this a bit already, but what role do you think higher education has to play in post-conflict Somalia specifically, and in post-conflict settings more broadly? And what initiatives beyond those that you've mentioned have you been part of to support students in Somalia? And you have addressed that question in part already.
Thank you, Rachel. It's a really good question. Higher education is extremely important for Somalia and any post-conflict society. As I mentioned, Somalia demographically are very young. Youth, close to 70% of the population are youth. Somalia needs at the moment productive members of society. We need the human resource. We need the human capital. We need skilled young people who can, work for their nation and for themselves. Higher education is concentrated in urban settings, and a few of them, like the capital and a few other cities. The quality is very low. Access and is very minimal, because higher education is there's monetary or fee associated with it. A majority of Somali young people cannot afford. The Somali National University is the only public institution that most of the students can access without fees, but it's still not accessible to majority. So having a quality, accessible higher education is actually the solution to the ongoing conflicts. It's the ongoing insecurity, all these environmental issues, health issues, traumatic experiences. So I cannot, list all the benefits that higher education will be, will set for Somalia. But suffice it to say it that what kind of higher education we need is the key question that I've been asking for the last a few years. Is that to be honest, we cannot afford to have theoretical fields like in the arts and humanities and things like that. We need to skill these young people so that they have their own livelihood and they can contribute to the nation building. So how is that being done? Is it's not systematic, it's not organized, it's not funded, and there's no international contribution. The only contribution that's coming to Somalia is through is for basic education. Majority is basic literacy and numeracy programs. Investing in higher education is a national endeavor, we understand. As a Somali government, we understand. But there is a role for international community as well. International funds and have to open up for rebuilding higher education in Somalia, not because it's needed because there's a high demographic of youth that need skills and livelihoods, but like I said before, it's the ideological change, it's the global inclusion that is needed at the moment. because Somalia, due to civil war, has been isolated for the past a few decades from the world. And it can open so many doors for the youth, for the young people. And we need that change in the way we think, the way we move forward, the way we develop our country, and the way we become members of the global community.
Thank you so much. Misoy, do you want to take over?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. And thank you, Fosia and Kombo, for that, taking us through that section. I want to give the panelists 1 minute each before we move to the question and answer session. And I want to ask each of the panelists to just tell us what excites them most about their current work in higher education. And then also what initiatives do they think will best support their students. So in no particular order, maybe I'll start with Professor Kerry, who is next to me on the screen.
You're putting me on the spot. I think that this is a very like teacherly response. I think what excites me most about these programs now is like honestly seeing the students, my students, like master skills and progress. I mean, whether or not it's like how to write a the students who are here, how to write a 5-paragraph essay, right? How to write a good thesis statement, or that insight to figure out, you know, a new relationship to a question. Like it's very, it's inspiring to me to see students really taking advantage of their educational opportunities and moving ahead despite, speaking of like the culture shock that Professor Kombo was talking about, despite very challenging conditions. So that's the best. It's seeing the students succeed. And in terms of what I think is most needed, I mean, I just say from my perspective right now, like what I'd love to see more, I'm now going to throw it back to the international community. Like there just needs to be more scholarships. There needs to be more attention paid to this need for higher education for displaced students, and there needs to be more money to support their degree programs. Like universities and communities just can't do it on their own. Like there has to be sustainable support for this project. Thanks.
Thank you, Kerry. Professor Kombo, what excites you most?
Thank you so much. I want also to say this is a surprise question, like Professor Kerry, what she has said. But I want to say that what excites me most is the change that we bring to people's lives. These are people who require to really change from what they are to something better. So once I see that particular change has been realized, it really satisfies me and it excites me most. Probably what I've done, because it's the initiative that I've done myself, and I want to say I've done two things. One is that I've involved communities in my discussion, because there is nothing that I do without involvement of the local community. And in Kenya, and Mr. Misoy, you will bear me witness that we have something we call stakeholders participation. If you do something without involving the stakeholders, then you will get opposed. So that is something that I've done. Whatever action that I take, I involve them. Then the other one is I extend it also to the members of staff. We discuss before we do anything. But we as a university, and myself, because I lead my team, is that we identify the need areas that require our input or my input, and then from there we come up with the ways and means of sorting out those cases that may require our input. Thank you. I think I can just say that as at now.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Kombo. Fosia, what excites you most? What initiatives do you feel will best support your students?
For me, what excites me is that Somalia is at the cusp of recovery and progress, and I am extremely appreciative and honored to be in the middle of that change and progress, and contributing to really the recovery aspects, particularly in the education sector. In my current job, we have developed a curriculum for accelerated basic education for Somali children, nearly 3 million that are out of school. So this is what drives me. This is what keeps me here. This is what excites me and gives me hope that soon things will be better. And all that contribution, all that energy, all that efforts for collaboration and contribution we are almost seeing the results. We're almost there. So that's what excites me every day. And, it's like my cup of coffee. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. It's exciting to know that your daily work with the students and the beneficiaries is giving you lots of excitement, and it's the driving force towards achieving part of the objectives that have been set by the institutions to provide access to refugees to have higher education. Now, we will be moving to a question and answer session. So the participants could ask their questions, and there is one question that we already have in our chats. So as this question is being answered, I think the other participants who have questions could also write their questions on the chat, or maybe you can raise your hand and we'll ask you to put your question forward. So there's a question from Rebecca, who is asking, what role can students globally and locally play in advocating for more access for refugees to higher education? What role can students globally and locally play in advocating for more access of refugees to higher education? So the panelists could answer this in any order. Whoever is ready could go first. Kerry, would you want to start?
Sure. I think that there's two different, like, speaking from our position in Germany, I guess, or maybe also thinking about York University and some of the other organizers might want to jump in. I think there's two different elements. Like, one of them are students, displaced or refugee students themselves. Like, I think that it's really important to for them to have support to each other. And I know that UNHCR has just, helped to create a mentoring group, and there's other kinds of mentoring groups that are available, but so that students with this experience are able to share their tips and support and networks with other students, and we have two students at Bard College Berlin who are working on that, both for their national organizations with the Syrian Youth Assembly and an emerging Afghan student youth initiative that's attempting to raise access to higher education, that's being spearheaded by individual students with the background of displacement. But I also think there's a huge role that can be played by other students in the university. I know that I believe that some of the scholarships funded in Canada by WUSC, for instance, come from students agreeing voluntarily to provide funding to support scholarships. I think there's also, at our campus in Berlin, we had two US students and a French student start a group, students helping to organize for the refugees of Europe, who were collecting donations and raising awareness about issues. So Yeah, I think that in fact, students themselves are one of the most important groups that can bring this forward. I find people often are willing to listen to a student much more than they're willing to listen to me. So I think that fostering those projects is incredibly important.
Is it my turn? Thank you. I feel that question is too broad and a very good, as well as being a very good question. And I want to say that the first one is really to raise their voice, to be heard, instead of just keeping quiet. And we have quite a number of forums where they can be able to raise up their voice and say, look, we have this kind of a situation, or we have this problem and we want it sorted out. And this is where we bring in the international community, like the UN. When members meet there, we should have a voice. We should have a person who will just go there and say, look, we have this problem of education and we really want to have something. But the issue is on advocacy. What is it that they can do to make others know that there is a problem? And once we raise the international awareness that there's a need for education, and there are some people who are suffering and they want it, in my view, that can be able to change the perspective. The issue, and it has been raised by Kerry on scholarship, is that it should not, this exercise should not be left to a few, but it should, because money will never be enough, and a time comes when it gets exhausted. So we should be able to involve all and sundry, so that at least they can be able to participate. And that is why I'm saying, once the students raise up their voice, and we have people who care also do the same, raise their voices, so that at least the international community can be able to see that there's a need for it. And I'm feeling that with some noise being made, or some people being told that there is a problem and appeal for support, I'm sure that something can be done.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kombo. Fosia? Okay, I think.
Thank you. I think the two professors have captured it well, so I have nothing more to add to that point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. There was a question from Fadin, but I think it's been addressed by Rachel. I don't know if there's anyone else with a question at this stage.
You know, I have a question, and I'd like to be very brief with it, just so we can wrap up by 10:30. And that's for those of you who do work in Kenya, or who are in Kenya. You may know that the Kenya Refugee Act was signed by President Kenyatta in November, which will shift kind of the landscape of possibilities for refugees living in Kenya. And I'm just wondering if very, very briefly, you know, Dean Kombo or somebody else could speak to how you think this will affect your work in refugee education in the Kenyan context. And I know, you know, Professor Bystrom, you also work in Kenya through your program.
Thank you so much. I think this is something that we are proud of as a country. And I want to say that Kenyans, they are really very welcoming people. They welcome even visitors, refugees alike. And the discrimination that was there in form of an act, it was removed. And this Refugee Act is the recent one, because as you have rightly captured, it was done in November 2021. And it's out of the culture that we have in the country of not discriminating against people. And the president himself, in his wisdom, he said, let the refugees access education, let them access work, let them get whatever work that they can come across, and let them also be integrated economically, that they can work anywhere, provided that they are able to keep law and order. And I want to say that when that was done, we have managed to get support from quite a number of organizations, UNHCR, even the refugees themselves. They are happy that at least they can be able, they can be allowed to look for their own money, they can work. And that aspect of being vulnerable, it is no longer there because they can work and they can, the dignity has been returned to the refugees who are in Kenya. So basically, I can say that, and I want to say that in Kenya, we have around 500,000 refugees, and this one has come at the right time where we want the dignity of the refugees to be restored. I don't know whether I've answered the question, but I want to say that as a country, we are also excited that the president really gave an okay to this one.
Thank you, Professor Combo. That's helpful to hear your perspective on. I see a question. I don't know, Professor Bystrom, if you want to add to that or if you, okay. So there's a question for Professor Warsami in the chat. If you want to take on briefly, I know you've addressed some of it in your comments previously, but it says, I assume you work in the education sector. It's evident that Somalia is a post-conflict country and young growing country that has its own challenges, one of them being low quality education. What efforts or collaborations working in Somalia plan to do about this? So perhaps, looping back to the work you're doing now might make sense, or anything else you have insight on, Professor Warsami.
Thank you, very good question. Lots of efforts have been done to increase the quality of the Somali education sector. Recently, we have endorsed the Somali National Curriculum for the secondary and basic education. We have also endorsed the accelerated basic education. There has the national policy, or as it's known as the Education Act, has been endorsed and validated. All these contribute to quality of the education and system building. Lots of efforts going on in terms of access. Initially, there was a huge problem with access. Majority of Somali kids were not able to access school due to funds, due to lack of schools, due to being in remote area, due to security. But now access over the last few years, with the help of international contribution, access is getting much better. The next mandate for the Somali government is to do something about quality. It starts with having a quality nationalized curriculum that all schools and all students have. Also, lots of efforts being done towards teacher and teacher development, building a system of teachers. Great efforts being done all around, and lots of different programs funded by the international community have greatly contributed to the progress of access and quality in Somalia.
Thank you so much, Professor Warsami. You took on a big and important question right at the end there. I just wanted to say thank you to today's participants. I think it's been a really wonderful session, and made wonderful because we've had a transnational perspective on the issues that we're talking about. And that, I think, has been one of the most exciting parts of this speaker series, which is coming to an end today. So thanks to everybody who has participated in our past 12 sessions over the last 2 years. And thanks once again to York University's Center for Refugee Studies and Faculty of Education for funding these conversations. It's been a really wonderful learning experience. And in the chat box, we have the links for this year's recordings and last year's recordings so that you can use these events and refer to them, as learning tools, teaching tools moving forward. So thanks to everyone, and be well. I look forward to continuing conversations into the future. Thanks to our panelists again.